Hey everybody, welcome back to Game Esoterica and our continuing series of Ridge Evolution. It's a hard word to say, but it's an arcade retrospective on the Ridge Racer franchise. And today we got a little bit of a bonus episode to break things up. This is Pocket Racer running on the Namco System 11 arcade board, which is a derivative of the PlayStation 1 hardware. And interestingly, this is another bit of Namco recycling because in Ridge Racer Revolution, there is a bonus feature called Pretty Racers in there that basically did a super deformed version of Ridge Racer, and Namco brought that into an exclusive arcade release, marking this as the last mainline arcade game in the Ridge Racer franchise. If you can't tell already, compared to all the other arcade games, this is definitely a graphical downgrade, because compared to the System 22, this is PlayStation 1 spec hardware, so it has no chance in the world of looking the same. And I will say, as far as the physics and handling are concerned, this is a complete departure of what you know and love from the Ridge Racer franchise. It is just a curiosity. They were having some fun, they decided to add a bonus feature into a PlayStation 1 game, and then they backported that with some changes to a budget arcade release that only came with a stand-up arcade cabinet. There was no full-size cab for this one, but it's not a problem that it's completely different. It's a fun touch just to have something like this. You're going to see I do bounce off a lot of stuff here, and that's because this game controls completely different than you are used to when it comes to any sort of Ridge Racer. Again though, first-person cockpit view is going to be the best way to get around the track, but it's fun that developers did this in and of itself. This is basically just a weird little bonus that they decided to pop onto an arcade board, and obviously because both the original release as well as this arcade version were based on PlayStation 1 hardware, it was a relatively easy port, I'm sure, to bring over because it shared a lot of the code base, and Namco System 11 is very close to original PlayStation 1 hardware. This does have 2 tracks in it, that is it, it's limited to just 2, and they are basically just some reskins of the original tracks. So again, Namco just loved to recycle so much. They would make so many different games out of basically the same base asset and content, and by this point in time in 1996, if you saw this, you may be a little bit let down by it, but at least in my imagination, this release was way more geared towards children. The colorful graphical nature of it, the super deformed cars, the upright cabinet all seem to scream, kids come over and give me your lunch money, or at least that's what they did in the US, but this game never actually came out to the US in an arcade cabinet. Don't know if Japanese children have lunch money or not that they can spend at the arcades instead like I used to back in the day. But it is fun when we talk about a series like this to talk about 1 or 2 offshoots. Obviously these retrospectives are just mainline games, but something as weird and unique as Pocket Racer definitely deserves a mention, and I will say for running on PlayStation 1 hardware it does look quite good as well. Obviously it would never keep up with the System 22, which was a hardware beast compared to the PlayStation 1, but this is in the era in which the Ridge Racer franchise left arcades and would never basically go back, and because this is not part of the mainline Ridge Racer franchise, really Rave Racer was still the last game ever to release on arcade hardware, with Pocket Racer just being a little bit of a pivot. But Namco loved doing fun, cute things like this. Stuff like Point Blank had a very similar graphical style, even though that was primarily in 2D. And if you look at some of the billboards, you will see advertisements for Point Blank and other Namco arcade and home console properties from back in the day. This is just a weird release. There's no other way to say it. I'm not sure why they decided to do it, outside of it must have been a quick, down and dirty, cheap port to an arcade board that they thought even if they didn't sell that many of, they would turn a profit. I've never seen an arcade cabinet for this in my life, but then again, I've never been to Japan, so I really wouldn't have much of an opportunity to do so. But I don't often see this PCB for sale either, so it's one of those things. Maybe it just wasn't that successful back in the day. But as we beat in the first course here, you get this little bit of an outro. We did get first place, even though I was bouncing around the game all over the place. This is at normal difficulty, and you can definitely tell the difficulty has been dialed down to bring this to a way wider and younger audience, at least in my opinion. But you'll see here there are only 2 tracks. That's what the game gives you. It gives you 4 cars to choose from as well, and they basically all control exactly the same, so really it is just cosmetic. But if this is a kid's game, you still get a woman in a bikini giving you the race starting symbol. It does have a great soundtrack though. Listen, and I'll be right back.
Now go for the lead! 3 laps to go!
Awesome music, but what do you expect out of a Ridge Racer game? And with the PlayStation 1 sound hardware on board, you're always going to have a good sound time as well. But what I do love to do is compare these different releases, because even though this is the latest arcade release as far as the years are concerned, it is graphically the most inferior. So what I'm going to do is put them side by side, Pocket Racer on the left and Ridge Racer 2 on the right, on the same course. You're going to see the absolute fundamental difference between PlayStation 1 hardware and arcades and Namco System 22. It is night and day different. It is the same track, but it does have some changes in the graphics, some simplified geometry, and definitely a much lower frame rate. But otherwise, it is still the same course from the original Ridge Racer as well as Ridge Racer 2, and that's what I mean when I talk about the fact that Namco loves to recycle things. This is the fourth arcade game in which this track has appeared, and they definitely got their money's worth out of it. But again, it was still the early to mid 90s when these things were coming out. 3D development was still not in its infancy by 96, but gaining its sea legs, if you will, so it's not surprising they would reuse assets. You can still use a lot of the same bits, you just need to down convert them to run on PlayStation 1. But Pocket Racer has those really fun Namco vibes that I know and love, and there's a lot of different games that remind me of this, but the number one that you really wouldn't make a connection to, but I do, is Armadillo Racing. It's another weird arcade racing game from Namco, just like Pocket Racer, but you run around the course as an armadillo. Honestly, they don't have much in common whatsoever, but how often do you get a chance to talk about Armadillo Racing? It's a very strange game, but you should definitely check it out if you don't get a chance. It just has that same kind of kid vibe that something like Pocket Racer does as well. As we jump back into Pocket Racer on the second course again, this is a weird release to end the arcade lineage for Ridge Racer. We had Ridge Racer 2, and Rave Racer all on the same board, and then you get one offshoot release in 1996, and Ridge Racer would never see arcade floors again. Every single release after this would either be for a handheld console, a mobile phone, or obviously game consoles moving on. And even then, the last game in the mainline franchise is Ridge Racer 7 way back on the PlayStation 3. This series is long overdue for a new game, and I do these ahead of time, so maybe they've announced one, and you can all leave a comment down below telling me that I was wrong. I'm guessing, though, that this is still the last game in the franchise as far as Ridge Racer 7 is concerned. But tell me down below which one of the Ridge Racer games is your favorite in arcades. I'm assuming none of it's going to be Pocket Racer, but tell me if you've ever played this before or even knew it existed outside of that little bonus material on the PlayStation 1 version. But that's the great thing about games like this. It doesn't matter how you play them, they are a fun time, and we are talking about the history of a franchise. You really have to talk about all of the games, even the strange ones like Pocket Racer here. You'll see again I got first place. It is quite easy to do in something like Pocket Racer. But popping back over to Rave Racer this time, again it is just so wild how often they would use this one course. This may be one of the most used bits of asset in any arcade franchise I have ever seen. I've been playing arcade games my entire life, and I've been talking about them on this channel for over 6 years, from Rave Racer to the original Ridge Racer right here, and very shortly moving over to Ridge Racer 2. This one course has seen more action in arcade games than any other course I think imaginable. But tell me down below if you can think of another instance of this, because nothing pops to my head. But the good thing is, no matter how many times you race around this one course in Ridge Racer, it is always an absolute fun time, and Pocket Racer is one of those curiosities that existed back in the day, and I'm sure most people have forgotten about. But that's the great thing about retrospectives, we get to bring you some of the weird history along with the more commonly known stuff. But I'll be back next week with more Ridge Racer action. I'll have videos throughout the week as well, but if you've never played Pocket Racer, give it a try, it is fun. See you next time. Bye bye.